something that's very important for any believer to experience the resurrection life of Christ and the power of Christ's life is that we need to change our thinking to God's mentality. We need to align our thinking with God's thinking. Why? Because God is reality. And if we want to experience God's reality, we've got to change our thinking to the way He thinks. And today I want to talk about something that is so foreign to the Western mindset. God's not a Westerner. Let me explain by starting with a question. When your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was born, where were you? And the answer is, your life was in her. You were there. See, when a female is born, she's born with all the eggs she'll ever have for the rest of her life. None will be created, none will be formed. And you were in her. And let's just say, for example, she died when she was 3 years old from an accident or a disease. You wouldn't be here today. So from God's point of view, when she was born, you were there. And we see in Hebrews how God thinks about this, in that Lot gave tithes to Melchizedek, even though he wasn't even born. How did he do that? Well, Abraham gave tithes to Melchizedek. And Lot, even though he wasn't born, Lot's life was within Abraham. The Bible word is that he was in the loins of Abraham. So the way God thinks, so we've got a glimpse into how God's thinking here. The way God thinks is even though Lot wasn't born, he still gave those tithes to Melchizedek. Now, Paul has tapped into this thinking of God. Paul said this in one of the most amazing scriptures. He said, "For I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me." Isn't that an amazing verse? But Paul says, I've been crucified with Christ. Was he physically there? Was he physically at the resurrection? No, but spiritually he was there. Was he there when Jesus rose out of the tomb? No, but spiritually he was there. So spiritually he's been crucified with Christ, and spiritually he's risen with Christ. And that's why he wrote that that when we get baptized, we are buried with him in baptism. So if you like, we are buried in a tomb of water. But then we rise with Jesus out of the water. So in a sense, you and I both, we've been crucified with Christ, but we also have risen with Christ. We were there. See, that's why it says that when Adam sinned, death spread to the whole of the human race. How did that happen? Because of the whole of the human race were there. See, this is how God thinks. And you might say, well, that's a bit unfair. I wasn't there. I didn't do the deed. Why should I be born with Adam's nature? Why should I be born with his nature to disobey and to serve my self-interest? Well, that's how God thinks. But there's another side to the coin. That's wonderful. Because just as death entered the whole of the human race in Adam, so life entered the whole of the human race through Jesus. So when Jesus was resurrected, you were there. So the point I want to make is this, that Jesus didn't come to improve the Adam life in you. He didn't come to fix it up. He came to die as Adam in you, So when he was crucified, the old Adam in you was killed off. When he was crucified, the active nerve to that old Adam life is gone. And we must understand this and change our mind to this to live in the reality of the life of Christ. That we are no longer living with a nature because he doesn't exist. We're not giving place to it. We're not focusing on it. We're not thinking about it. You see, when he was crucified, when Jesus was crucified, we were there. The old Adam in me died on that cross. Powerful stuff. But also when Jesus rose again, the new me rose with him. You see, the first Adam in me has been cut off and crucified. And now the last Adam, Jesus, lives in me. And this is one of the major differences between Christianity and all other religions. Jesus isn't about improving your behavior. He's about giving you a brand new nature. It's about nature transformation. It's about regeneration. See, the Christian life is so much more than just keeping you out of hell and forgiving your sin. It's about living out of the resurrection life of Christ. So, the old Adam life in you has been crucified. You were there when it was crucified. You were there 2,000 years ago. But also you were there when the last Adam rose, and that nature is now in you. And that's why Paul says, he says, Christ in you, the hope of glory. The Christ in me is the only hope of getting the glory of God's reality out of me.